Hi everybody, and welcome to the latest Lawshare Q&A, and I'm delighted to be joined by my partner and joint head of our family department here in the Manchester office, Elspeth Kinder. Thanks very much for joining me, Elspeth.
Thanks, Pete.
Needless to say, I'm going to be asking Elspeth questions about family law. So I understand there are going to be some changes coming in April of this year, and I've just wondered whether you could tell me a little bit about what's coming in and what we can expect.
Yeah, so finally, after lots of talk and debate over the last few decades, we're seeing a reform to the law. So from the 6th of April, the no-fault divorce reforms will come into effect, which essentially changes the basis upon which a couple can get divorced. So as things currently stand, we have to rely on a very old piece of legislation from 1973, which essentially means that if a couple want to get divorced shortly after they separate, they've got to blame one another for the breakdown of the marriage, and that can really turn up the tension and the temperature at a point in time when the lawyers are trying to calm things down, trying to find a resolution to the bigger issues around arrangements for their children or their financial settlement. So the no-fault divorce reforms are really welcome, and we're looking forward to them coming into effect.
Right, okay. I've heard a lot about sort of no-fault divorce, and on a practical level, will this sort of simplify things for yourself and other family lawyers?
It will do significantly. At the moment, we have to ask the client to come up with half a dozen or so reasons why they're blaming the other person for the breakdown of their marriage. And that can be things like debates about money, falling out about children, all sorts of difficulties they might have gone through in their marriage. All of that falls away with the reforms. And what we have now is a statement from one party that there's been an irretrievable breakdown of their marriage. That statement can be made jointly if they both want to do that, so that can be a more consensual way of moving things forward. But whichever route, there's no need to blame one another anymore. It's a simple statement and start the divorce proceedings, and we move forward from there.
Oh, that's great. So presumably things will become a lot more amicable. Will it sort of streamline things, perhaps?
It will certainly streamline things. I think we never forget as family lawyers that for a couple who are going through a separation and a divorce, it can be traumatic, which is the benefit of the no-fault reforms, because we don't want things to become even more difficult than it already is, but certainly more streamlined.
So it's been talked about before, I understand, so is this kind of a long time in coming?
It is, yeah. Back in '96 there was actually a reform to the legislation to introduce no-fault divorce, but it didn't get up and running properly, and the law was actually repealed, and we fell back to the 1973 legislation and this need to blame. And where this clamour for the eventual reforms that are about to take effect came about is fairly recently, 2018, there was a lady called Tinny Owens who was really well reported in the press. She wanted to get divorced from what she described as a fairly wretched marriage, and her husband challenged and contested her divorce petition, and ultimately her case went right through to the Supreme Court, and the justices found that they had to apply the law, and the law meant that they couldn't allow her divorce to proceed, and she had to wait 5 years from the point when they'd separated to be entitled to petition for divorce without having to have his consent to that process. And of course for Mrs. Owens, that was a long time to wait. She just wanted to be divorced from a man where she was desperately unhappy. And she was 70 by the time she was able to do that. These reforms would mean that she would have been able to press on straight away. And I think there was such concern for the situation that she was placed in, and a really careful consideration of the impact it was having on anybody in her situation who wanted a divorce. This press for the essential reforms came about again, and thankfully the law was repealed.
Excellent. So will this assist in making decisions surrounding children and finances as a part of the fallout of divorce?
Yes, yeah, in the sense that we'll have a better opportunity to focus on the important issues around children and what those arrangements should look like for them, and the financial settlement, rather than getting drawn into an upset and a debate around blaming one another for the breakdown of the marriage, when that's really old news. That's something that people are trying to move forward from and find resolution. So yes, it should help, absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, thanks ever so much, Elspeth. That's a fantastic overview of the changes that are coming in. If you do have any questions for Elspeth, or indeed any referrals to make, you know the address. It's lawshare@gmw.co.uk. Myself and the rest of the team will be happy to put you in touch with Elspeth and her team. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and keep an eye out for our next Q&A. Thanks very much. Thank you, Elspeth.
Thank you.